First item, election of chairman for the joint meeting. I'd like to thank Mr. Kitson Yan, chairman of the panel on food and environmental hygiene, for his agreement for me to chair the joint meeting today. Any objection, please, from members? If members have no particular views, then I will chair this meeting. First, let me cancel the the request to speak system. And then when I invite the administrator to join us, then we will turn on the system again. Now, apart from the joint meeting, there's a meeting of the panel on environmental affairs at 4 p.m. So we must end this meeting on time, or at most we can only finish late by 5 minutes. Otherwise, the next meeting will have to be aborted. So we have to finish this meeting on time. Now, can I ask the secretary to switch off the request to speak system first? Mr. Tommy Zhang. Now, while I was speaking, Chairman, if you would remind the officials not to speak at length, because there are 18 members already who wish to speak. So I'm not even sure if I'm included in the list, because everything is already reported in the news. So please ask them to be very brief in the introduction. Okay, we will turn on the system again when the administration joins us. So members will have to press the request to speak button again. Okay. Item 2, the way forward for municipal solid waste charging and other waste reduction and management measures. Attending the meeting, we have the Deputy Chief Secretary, Mr. Chak Wing Heng, Mr. Chia Chin Wan, Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Ms. Janice Jam, Permanent Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Environment, Dr. Samuel Choi, Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Bruno Luk, Deputy Chairman of Environmental Protection, and other officials. Now, we have limited time, so I'll invite the administration to speak first. I'll hand over to the Deputy Chief Secretary, Mr. Chuck. Chairman, members, on the 19th of January this year, the administration announced delaying the implementation date for the municipal waste charging scheme from the 1st of April to the 1st of August. And also there would be a demonstration scheme to be implemented in 14 locations. This is for us to find out about possible problems arising from the implementation of the scheme. Now, we've had 8 weeks of the demonstration scheme. The administration has already collected sufficient information and data for analysis. Today, I am the Secretary for Environment and Ecology, are here to report to members on the findings of the demonstration scheme. In the demonstration scheme, we found there were pro and con views. There were views that designated bags were too expensive. They added to the burden of households. And also, it's actually not environmentally friendly to use designated bags. And we have limited living space in Hong Kong, so it's not easy to save waste for recycling. And also, there are not sufficient recycling facilities. At the same time, the whole process is complicated, so it adds to the workload substantially of frontline cleansing staff. And then for property management companies, if they have to comply with the scheme requirements, and management fees will have to go up. And then for 3 new buildings, there are concerns that there would be indiscriminate disposal of waste leading to environmental hygiene problems. And then for different sectors such as eating establishments and residential care homes, they may have to shoulder additional costs in the implementation of the scheme. So from the views we have collected and from the views reported in the news, we can see that there are not many people who support the scheme. About 70 to 80% are in objection to the implementation of the scheme. They propose to delay the scheme by phases, or at least until 2026. Some have even asked for the shelving of the scheme altogether. In the from the demonstration scheme, we can see from the EPD report that the whole waste collection process is cumbersome. and most participants in the scheme did not make good use of the distributed designated bags. This was even more obvious in the latter part of the demonstration scheme. The volume of recycled waste and the habit of waste disposal did not change much, but rather there's been a substantial additional workload for cleansing staff. And also operating costs would go up for eating establishments and residential care homes. So therefore, on the basis of the finding, the Secretary for Environment and Ecology suggested to me to delay the implementation date of the scheme. That is, we won't implement the scheme on the 1st of August. In fact, we learned from various survey findings that there is a strong reservation among the public about the implementation of the scheme, and there are not sufficient recycling facilities. And apart from these 2 points, the third point is that although there's an expansion of the recycling network, the expansion is still limited. Fourthly, the current waste charging scheme gives the wrong impression that the government is trying to raise revenue from the scheme. Fifthly, the workload of frontline staff and also the stress will be substantially increased. And sixthly, economic recovery is not as fast as expected. If we implement the charging scheme now, it will lead to immense pressure to the business sector, including the catering sector. That's why I agree with the Secretary for Environment and Ecology. So I have in turn put forward the recommendation to the Chief Executive, and the recommendation is accepted by the Chief Executive. So we now announce that the government will delay the implementation of the charging scheme on the 1st of August. We will be publishing a notice by Gazette to scrap the implementation date of the 1st of August. We will also repeal the reference notice on the charging scheme. The government will be enhancing public education and improving recycling. We will also consider other ways of enhancing the waste charging scheme. In a moment, I will invite my my colleague to further explain our initial ideas to you. Now, we will monitor the habit change of the public in waste disposal. We believe we cannot rush to change the habits or behavior of the over 7 million people over a short period of time. We expect this to be a lengthy process. We will report the work, our progress in mid-2025, and we'll see whether there is enhanced participation by the public in the scheme, and we'll also listen to members' views. Now I'll invite SCE, Mr. Chair, to brief you on our work plan for the coming year. Mr. Chair. Chairman, members. The demonstration scheme findings, views of the public, and the news reports show that we do not have the right condition to implement the municipal solid waste charging scheme. So we need to substantially improve recycling facilities. We need to promote a much stronger recycling culture in the community. Now, we want to change the habit of over 7 million people in Hong Kong. It is a major challenge. It involves work on many different fronts. So we need to do so progressively. We will not be ready in a short space of time. But then the government has always been committed to reducing waste. We will continue to promote waste reduction and separation of waste for recycling. The demonstration scheme provided us with much useful information. In the past 2 months, we learned more about the views of the public, and in fact, some in the community are starting to learn how to recycle separate and recycle kitchen waste or food waste. So the 2 months of the demonstration scheme were useful indeed. And then we will continue to promote further public education. We will substantially reduce waste at source. At the same time, we will consider how we could enhance the various schemes and consider the various issues identified. We will keep reviewing the progress of our work, and we'll assess public participation or public buy-in of the concept. As the Deputy Chief Secretary mentioned, we will give you another report in the middle of next year. Now I will briefly explain our work in the coming year. Since the assumption of office of this term of government, we have substantially increased recycling facilities. We have already provided more public collection points. There were 170 public housing estates covered. And now there are over 200 public rental housing estates with food waste recycling bins. And then for private estates, housing estates, we also are helping them to set up recycling bins. There are over 30,000 eating establishments in Hong Kong. We still do not have enough collection points for food waste in this for this trade. So we will keep expanding our recycling network. And then we hope that we will be able to recycle 1/3 of municipal solid waste. That's our target. In private residential estates, especially large ones, we will be adding more food waste recycling facilities. We hope that within a year, we'll be able to double the number of such facilities. And then in the coming year, we're going to set up another 100 mobile food waste collection points, and in refuse collection points, we'll be setting up such recycling bins. So there will be more channels for the public to learn how to separate waste and recycle food waste. So we will closely monitor the usage rate of the food waste recycling facilities. At where there's a high usage, we will be providing more such bins. We will also extend the operating hours of recycling points, and we will increase the number of greener community points from 200 to 800. We are going to enhance the appeal of recycling. So for the Green Dollar Incentive Scheme, we are considering whether we can turn the dollars into vouchers. And then the APD has also implemented a waste separation of waste at source scheme for for over 1,200 commercial buildings. We have implemented the scheme, but then the feedback we got is that the recycling bins are not properly managed, and recyclables are instead treated as waste by cleaning workers. So we need to make better use of our vast network of recycling facilities. So there will be a waste reduction charter. We encourage property management companies to sign the charter. They will then undertake to collect recyclables properly for handling by relevant recycling contractors. We will also encourage the public to learn to separate waste for recycling. So starting from the 1st of June, in the next 6 months, in public rental estates, housing estates, we will give them 20 designated bags to help them to get into the habit of separating waste or reducing waste, and then we hope that they'll be able to use the 20 designated bags for disposal of waste. There's no need for them to use additional bags. So because these then the frontline workers need not change the way they handle waste. For private buildings, I mentioned the waste reduction and recycling charter. And so the private property management companies can sign the charter so that recyclables could be collected for disposal. And then the designated bags could be distributed to private housing estates. And apart from providing designated bags, the green outreach teams and green at communities will all chip in to educate residents in private buildings on how to separate waste and recycle waste. We also monitor the use of designated bags. We'll see if there's any reduction in waste disposal or increase in recyclables. So we'll monitor if habit is changing. Now we need to step up publicity education for the whole community. So the EPD will work with different trade associations, schools, and so on to keep publicizing waste reduction and recycling. The demonstration scheme and views expressed in the community showed up various problems. So we will consider all these problems very carefully. We'll see how we can enhance the waste charging scheme. Most importantly, we will make sure that frontline cleaning workers won't be held legally liable, and we need to remove any obstacles in the scheme. We need to consider the design of the designated banks and improve the whole process, and we will also consider whether we could adopt a progressive approach in implementing scheme. The aim is for the public to embrace the scheme better and to make life easier for frontline workers. Now, the government is speeding up its effort to build modern incinerators. So by 2035, we will stop using landfills. We are also considering integrated approach integration with the Greater Bay Area. So together we could build a waste-free Greater Bay Area. So in mid-2025, we will again report our work to the panel, and we'll see whether it's more buy-in from the public and also report on the progress of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration and Secretary. Just now, the Secretary mentioned suspending the scheme, but then the government will not stop waste reduction. There will also be a roadmap and review of the current practice. In 1 year's time, the government will report the work of the progress. Members have already pressed the button to speak. Mr. Tong Li-che. I'm a member of the panel. I've been seated here for a long time. Well, I will now first read out the order of members. Dr. Teck Chi, Mr. Benson Look, Stephen Ho, Michael Tian, Mr. Tommy Chang, Mr. Chen Hakan, Mr. Michael Tian, Mr. Kissen Yang, Mr. Rebecca Chan, Mr. Lee Chen Kang, Ms. Chan Ka-pui, Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, Dr. Yaman Yu, Mr. Ronick Chang, Ms. Carmen Khan, Ms. Eunice Yong, Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Gary Zhang, Mr. Robert Lee, Ms. Professor Priscilla Leung. In a moment, well, that's all for the members who are going to speak. In the interest of time, 3 minutes for each member. Question and answers included. Dr. Teck Chi Yun. Thank you, Chairman. Several days ago, we received a report and I felt that it was full of errors. It mentioned a lot of problems, but there wasn't any solution. We always say that there are always more solutions than problems, but then the paper was silent on solutions. Just now, the Secretary briefed us on the work in the coming year. I support it. Well, I think the government is pragmatic. It has taken a pragmatic approach. If what the government had said had been implemented a year ago, the MSW charging scheme would have been much smoother right now. We have wasted 2 years' time. But anyway, I commend the government. I appreciate the government's being pragmatic. I have prepared a speech to criticize the government. But right now, I think the government is worth my support. I'd like the Secretary to clarify regarding waste reduction. I believe there are too many problems, but the government, will you press ahead with the policy? I hope the Secretary will once again tell us again. Well, there are many discussions about patients in residential care homes, frontline care workers, I hope you will think over these problems once again. In 1 year's time, what will happen? We don't know. The Secretary, can you tell us, after your work for 1 year, do you have any indicator, any KPI? With KPIs, we will be confident that we can implement the plan. Otherwise, in the absence of any KPIs, this is not ideal. You should have KPIs. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, I already said that the government has never changed in its policy intent to reduce waste. We will definitely promote waste reduction and separation of waste, as well as the recycling of waste. Apart from recycling network and publicity, we will also study how to enhance our scheme and address the problems identified. Dr. Tick just now mentioned any stakeholders, any trades, they have financial burden, and the MSW charging scheme will not encourage them to reduce waste. We'll cover this point in our plan as well. Well, what about any KPI? Do you have any KPIs? In our work, I have told you many figures, and we do have KPIs for our 1 year work plan. But it's all about the culture in society. So we need to evaluate the culture in society, and I'm not going to call it a KPI. In 1 year's time, we will discuss this in the council. Next, Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Chairman. The BPA and I support waste reduction, but we won't underestimate the difficulty and challenges in changing the habit of citizens. The government's plan has responded to the challenges in the community. There was much publicity in the community. And I believe this should still be the direction. That is, we should reduce waste and we should dump less and save more. In the questionnaire surveys, in page 12 and 13, there was actually positive results. For example, 100% of them used the designated bags of the government. Waste disposed of also decreased by 10 to 20%. There was positive response for these two groups of people. 40% of the residential care homes workers think that implementing MSW charging is difficult. It affects the workflow. However, for workers of government buildings, think that there is no difficulty. There isn't any additional responsibility either. How do we explain the difference? Is it because of the different types of waste, hence the differences? In the selected premise of government buildings, it seems quite easy for the workers working there. There was also positive result. In the first 2 months, there was a reduction of 10% of waste. This is a very good result. Will the administration consider how to encourage waste reduction? Meanwhile, in some appropriate government departments, will you implement trial schemes or demonstration schemes? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the questions. The reason for full compliance of residential care homes and government departments is that the management gave directions. For households, residents need to take the initiative, hence the differences. For government buildings, the reason why staff members find that it is not difficult is that not every single staff member also needs to use a designated bag. Instead, cleansing workers use designated bags to collect waste. So there's not much difference. For the reduction of waste of 10%, there is no difference in the workflow. Instead, in that period of time, we encourage staff members to reduce waste. So we need to encourage waste reduction through publicity. In different scenarios, there are different methods to achieve waste reduction. We will also cover this point in our studies. In the interest of time, if the Secretary has sufficient time, the Secretary will respond further. Mr. Stephen Ho, please switch on the mic for Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you. DAB held a press conference. The theme is to suspend MSW charging. We need to pragmatically reduce waste. The government presses ahead with waste reduction, and MSW charging is simply a means. But then the public may think that MSW charging becomes the main policy intent. This is probably due to a lack of publicity. I'm glad to learn from the government that we have adjusted the direction moving forward. The administration has also identified a couple of pain points. In some trades, there are difficulties in the rollout of the scheme. If these policies can be implemented and we can achieve our ultimate aim of waste reduction, will MSW charging be once again rolled out? Well, we can discuss it later in the future. Regarding changing the consumption pattern of the public, the government needs to learn the lesson. Like we groom children, we need carrot and stick approach. We do need to promote environmental protection, so we need to strike a better balance between using a stick and a carrot approach. For example, the green dollars can be used to redeem government consumption vouchers. What about vouchers of government services, for example, vehicle license plate services and so on? In a year's time, the administration will come back to the Legislative Council to report the work. I don't think it's time to talk about MSW charging. Instead, we need to talk about waste reduction. There may be people with ulterior motive which will criticize the government. We can see many different plans of the administration. Whenever we talk about waste reduction, the government needs to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, but we may not be able to achieve our aim. It seems that the administration has focused on public housing estates. For village houses, private housing, as well as 3 new buildings, I hope I will see more initiatives from the government. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Stephen Ho. On publicity, we'll definitely cover the entire territory. On the distribution of designated bags, it's not limited to public housing estates. As I mentioned, there will also be private housing estates. When they take part in our charter and are committed to waste reduction, we will also provide free designated bags. We want to extend publicity. We want to encourage them to take the first step. Next, Mr. Tommy Zhang. Thank you, Secretary. The government, not least the EEB, should not focus on penalizing the public. When you suspend the scheme, I'd like to talk about a carrot and stick approach. How should we encourage the public? How can we give the public more carrots, so to speak? After all, environmental protection is an issue that we must face squarely. For people like us in our age bracket, we have seen different resources being used, so we do need to encourage waste reduction. It's of course fine to sign a charter, but in private housing estates or in public housing estates, Should we set up more green and community stations with solar panels? Housing estates, be they public or private. For green dollars, do you call it green dollars? You mentioned expanding the green dollar program to allow them to redeem different gifts. I think this is indeed good. But regarding the F&B industry, under this ordinance, some eateries do not have to pay. However, some restaurants told me that their expenses increased from $3,000 to $9,000 or even $10,000. That is a twofold increase in their waste disposal fees. Well, I think you should look into the situation. When you once again roll out the charging scheme, you may have to look into the scheme once again. When giving carrots to the public or to the industry, you should start with medium to large scale restaurants. We have food waste of 1,000 tons or so per day. For those who are willing to work on separation of waste, of course, the medium to large scale eateries find it no problem. It's of course the best to waive these fees. Can you charge just half on these fees? This is also a carrot approach for workers of restaurants, for glass, plastics, food waste. These are more difficult to be handled. Can you cover all these as well? The FEHD is also under your purview. So, can it be modeled on the public transport system? For example, you can deduct their points. You can also use the same model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheung. Well, this secretary will first jot down your views, and they will come back and report later because we're really running out of time. Mr. Gary Chen. Well, I think it's a pragmatic approach for the government to shelve the MFW charging scheme. I hope it's only you're just shelving the scheme. You must not stop your work in achieving the waste reduction target. In the past 6 months or so, since you announced the implementation of the charging scheme, people in Hong Kong became so concerned about waste reduction. It's never happened in the past. And so there is much keener public interest on this topic. Maybe initially you were only able to collect about a ton or so of food waste each day, but now it's gone up to some 50 tons or so. So there's a substantial increase. That means the public are now starting to pay attention to environmental protection. So you may be shelving the scheme, but you must not stop your green effort. This is the most important. And then you should take this opportunity to keep people engaged in the green effort. For household waste, 1/3 of that is actually food waste. If we can do a good job in recycling food waste, then I'm sure we will be able to substantially reduce domestic waste. And also that could be recycling of paper, glass bottles, plastic bottles too. And that means we can reduce waste further. That's the first point. Second point, now we are resorting to charging as a way to promote waste reduction. It is like a punitive measure. Once you want to charge people, people will come up with various ways to evade the charge. Instead, perhaps you could consider giving rewards or incentives, and then people will look at the whole matter far more positively. Maybe at communities or with your green dollar incentive scheme and so on. And the DAB has been suggesting that for green dollars saved up, They could be used for paying, say, electricity tariffs, rates, or for redeeming vouchers and so on. I think that will be very appealing to the public, and then we'll be able to reduce waste as a whole. And then waste management is not just an issue for Hong Kong. We should consider the whole Greater Bay Area as a whole. So that's all I'd like to say. Any response from the Secretary? We thank Mr. Chan for his views. As I explained, during this period, we see a much keener public interest in waste recycling, and there's more public participation. In the past few months, we managed to collect 3 times more food waste. So we will keep expanding our recycling network and keep doing better education and publicity. And for the Greater Bay Area, yes, so we will promote an integrated approach in handling waste for the whole Bay Area. Mr. Michael Tan. Well, waste reduction means waste charging plus waste recycling. We've been talking about waste charging for over 2 decades, and there's been repeated delays, and only in 2023 that we passed, 2021 we passed the bill. Now the government has been focusing on the charging scheme instead of on waste separation and recycling. So there's a need to separate waste for recycling. We need to do more there. 2 weeks ago, I went to a function. I was the speaker. I said the waste charging scheme was not about poll tax, sort of. It's not about people having to pay to dispose of waste. Rather, it's about people doing good job in waste recycling, and so they don't have to pay. But then there are people who are lazy. They don't care. They just dump waste in the bag. They will just pay for the bags. In Canada, if you don't sort your waste and there's no recycling, then no one will collect your waste. And then in Hong Kong, the government is saying that you can pay and then you could mix your waste. And if you don't want to pay, then you separate waste. Then after I spoke, some came up and asked, so you mean that's actually the case? I don't have to pay for waste as long as I will recycle waste. So people didn't even know that before they heard that from me. So you've been doing a poor job really with your publicity and education. In any case, so far we've only had the demonstration scheme, and people are only hearing about the scheme. And then the government has also announced a blueprint that by 2035 we will no longer be using landfill, and now you don't have a time frame for implementing the charging scheme. You may not be using designated bags, and so you have distributed you'll be distributing bags to public rental housing for the next 6 months. But then if it's not going to make a difference about the bags you use, who would bother? So we will be back to square one. We have limited landfill space, and even if we rely on incinerators, we may not be able to dispose of all waste. I've always asked the government to distribute designated bags to the community for 3 months, but now we have seen various issues. That's why I agree we shouldn't proceed with the scheme on the 1st of August. So the roundtable asked the government to consider something else. From the 1st of January 2025, you should implement the scheme, but in the first year, you will require everyone to use 3 designated bags. And that's a grace period, and there will be no prosecution. If anyone is caught not following the requirement, there won't be a prosecution, there won't be fine, but the warning letters will be issued. So people know in future you have the capacity to enforce the law. And there could be more classes of fee charge exemption for special groups. They don't need to respond to my views. And we are the only one who is saying that we shouldn't give up on the scheme. So Mr. Tan has put forward his views to the administration. Please consider the views. Next, Mr. Kitson-Yen. Thank you. The new government has spent no effort in promoting recycling and environmental protection. We can all see that. We're glad to see the government is taking on board the views of the public, because we've been doing questionnaires in the past months or so. Our colleagues have been helping with that exercise, and we know what the data is like. So the government is deferring the waste recharging scheme, but I'm glad to see the government will proceed still with this recycling effort. There will be more food waste recycling bins and other recycling facilities. That's a good idea. Now, you say you're going to distribute free designated bags to public rental housing estates, so people learn to how to recycle waste. But then, apart from PRH estates, maybe we should promote the awareness of recycling among the public in terms of community education. As for the food waste recycling bins, I understand the government has a plan to reduce the number of households for an estate that's eligible for applying for the recycling bins. For example, in Kowloon City, there's a development with only 140 households. They are keen to recycle food waste, but they are not eligible to apply for the food waste recycling bin. So maybe you can consider reducing the number of households in a development. So various developments could also be equipped with some food recycling bins. On incineration, there are 2 incineration facilities. But then the volume they can handle is small. In Singapore, they have incineration facilities with a huge capacity. They can even dig out waste from landfills for incineration. So do we have a way out in integration with the Great Bay Area rather than just focusing on incineration? So after incineration, is it the case that we will then address the shortage of landfill space? If it's the case, then do we still need to consider charging? I hope the government will consider this in its review. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Yang, for your views. In our review, definitely, we will carefully consider your views. Community education, definitely, we're going to step it up. Food waste recycling bins. We will consider lowering the threshold for the provision of food waste recycling bins. As I mentioned, in the next year, we're going to expand the number of food waste recycling facilities, and we'll double the number. On incineration, I mentioned also earlier that we're going to speed up our effort to build modern incinerators. We will go back to the EA panel to give a report on the progress for the second incinerator. For the first incinerator, it will be completed next year. Greater Bay Area, we are going to promote integration of waste management for the whole Bay Area. Next, Ms. Rebecca Chen. Thank you. I think the Secretary and his team have listened to the views of the public. That's important. They are also adopting a pragmatic approach, because my office has done a survey, and the finding is that more than 70% of the public would like to see the delay of the scheme. They would like to see more support facilities first. And most importantly, now we're able to bring the people together, so we all move towards the goal of environmental protection. Secretary, you've told us a series of tasks that you're going to embark on. Now, on distribution of designated bags, 20 bags per unit for public rental housing estate. But I've said this many times, you shouldn't try to divide people in different classes when it comes to environmental protection and recycling. So why you are still just focusing on PRH estates with free distribution of designated bags? On the demonstration scheme, I received feedback from residential care homes. They face immense problems with recycling, because the items they dispose of cannot be recycled. For example, diapers. So will you have special measures for the residential care homes? They do want to recycle waste, but how can you help them achieve that? Food waste recycling bins, that's the third point. You say you're going to double the number of such bins. Well, you again just focus on PRH estates. I kept mentioning Mayfu Sunshine is the largest private housing development in Hong Kong. There are 99 blocks. Definitely, they should be provided with food recycling bins. Now, yes, you may be rolling out the waste reduction charter. Still, would you consider providing food recycling bins to more private developments?
Secretary, thank you, Ms. Rebecca Chan. We don't just distribute designated bags in public rental housing estates. For private housing estates that have signed the charter, we will also provide designated bags free of charge. We want to incentivize private housing estates to engage in waste reduction. So it also applies to private housing estates. On food waste, we don't just increase the number of bins in public housing estates, we also increase the number of facilities in private housing estates. And there will also be 100 more recycling points. In 100 refuse collection points, we will also provide more facilities. So this is not only applicable to public housing estates, we will enhance our recycling network. So I look forward to more collaboration between private housing estates and green and community facilities. Next, Mr. Lee Chen-kang. Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see that the administration has taken on board our views. It is pragmatic to shelve the MSW charging scheme. When it comes to waste reduction as source, how to handle waste, I believe members of the public know this well. But do we really need to adopt the punitive measures? Actually, Mr. Tommy Zhang also mentioned we should actually use reward schemes. For example, you can give applicants waiting for public housing estates more points. This can incentivize them. When you resume MSW charging scheme in the future, I hope the administration will also make amendments to the law. So frontline cleansing workers, owners corporation, they will be exempted from legal liabilities so that they do not have to work under pressure or worry. You also mentioned publicity or public education. Well, we need to implement the scheme in phases. For example, for industrial buildings, they have less food waste, and then we can move on to other types of building, say to industrial buildings. Through technologies, we can add RFID to bags. It's not expensive at present. This way, we can track the location of the designated bags. Today, these designated bags have become just ordinary bags. We should take advantage of this opportunity to adopt the principle of polluter pays principle as well as waste reduction as source. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Lee, for your suggestions. Indeed, while enhancing our scheme, there are many factors at play. We do need to consider all these factors. For example, how to exempt frontline workers from their legal liabilities and making their job easier. This is indeed an issue that we need to solve. Regarding using a carrot approach instead of a stick approach, we can consider more methods. But first of all, we need to take into account the fiscal position of the government. We need to tread cautiously. Will it give rise to problems about fairness? We keep an open mind. We will consider all options. When it comes to using technology, we will also explore that. Next, Ms. Judy Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Although the government is going to shelve the plan, that is, it's not going to be rolled out on August 1st, I'd like to commend Mr. Che and your team for your hard work. I understand that you have done a lot. Over the past few months, you met with the public, you held quite a number of talks in order to deepen the public understanding of the scheme. you have done quite a lot of surveys. The New People's Party also conducted some surveys or some opinion polls. We have identified similar public views. Our findings are similar. That is, the public may ask, why do we have to spend more instead? It seems that the government does not have the same goal as the public. The administration needs to tell the public the policy intent. So we should capitalize on this opportunity. When the public attaches great importance to environmental protection, we should take advantage of this. For example, there are many designated bags. We can distribute these bags to the public for free. In the public housing estates or for private housing estates that have signed a charter, or for people who support environmental protection, how can you encourage them to sign up for the Green Dollar scheme? You can give them designated bags for free. You can hold more workshops. When you attend the workshops, you will be given designated bags for free. So we shouldn't stop our public education work right here. There may be hiccups, but we do need to press ahead with our public education initiatives. How to make the public confident in the plan? We need to tell the public our policy intent. That way, we can enhance the level of public participation. The secretary mentioned adding more food waste bins and collection points in the community. I hope there will be a KPI for the percentage of food waste, not just for the Legislative Council, but a KPI for the public. That is, we need to reduce food waste. We had a discussion item in a panel. That is the proper collection of domestic waste. Will the shelving of the scheme also impact on another scheme? Secretary. Thank you, member. We need to study many different aspects in order to make enhancements. For example, for legislation in relation to waste management, how can we better implement waste management measures? Of course, we won't stop. We will definitely press ahead with our work. Ms. Elizabeth Cott. Thank you, Chairman. The administration has gained a lot of experience with the demonstration scheme, hence the decision to shelve the plan. I think this is a good decision in that the administration has taken on board the public views instead of pressing ahead with the scheme. I do support environmental protection work. We support waste reduction as source, so when the government floated the idea of MSW charging, we were of the view that it was difficult. With the experience over the last few months, it proved the DAB's questions in Bills Committee. It shows that the DAB has all along been pragmatic in Bills Committee meetings. It's not about the concept of the MSW charging. Is it correct? Is it not correct? No, it's not about the concept, but it's about whether it can be rolled out pragmatically. That's exactly why we're worried about the rollout of the scheme. So when the government is going to roll out policies, you do need to consider the implementation aspect. Otherwise, this will be considered a public disturbance to the community. As many members have said, the community has a heightened awareness of environmental protection. After the waste is recycled, will they be sent to landfills or will it be recycled? That's the question of the public. And must we use the MSW charging method and designated bags? It's worth our discussion. We can further explore this area. Instead of rolling out punitive measures, we should consider giving rewards to the public. It's good that the administration has green dollar scheme. There were over 500,000 participants of the scheme. There are actually a lot of members of the public who are not aware of the green dollar scheme. Apart from redeeming for instant noodles, oils, we should also consider cash incentives to attract more members of the public to take part in the scheme. Actually, many more members of the public will be more willing to take part in the scheme if there are more rewards such as vouchers and so on. I'm glad to learn about the integration of resources in the GBA that was first floated by the DAB, that is the Waste-Free GBA. I hope the government will implement this. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. At the initial stage of the demonstration scheme, the FTU already appealed to the participants to do well in the demonstration scheme, so we can better plan the MSW charging scheme. That will also give us some background information. There are, however, rumors in society that is, for example, the scheme wouldn't be rolled out according to the schedule. According to a report given by the administration, there are more members of the public who get the designated bags than those who use the DBs. For frontline cleansing workers, their workload has increased dramatically. This is a fact. This is what we were told by cleansing workers. On Labor Day, that is the 1st of May, the secretary went to the public housing estates in Taiwan to speak to cleansing workers in the front line. Frontline workers expressed their views to the administration. Their feedback is worth our reference. Waste reduction and environmental protection are the global trend. We lack recycling facilities. Members of the public need a longer time to learn and adapt to this new culture, so the administration has already shelved the plan and given the public a longer time. If we are going to shelve the plan owing to objective circumstances, how can we build an objective standard from scratch in order to press ahead with the government policies? It's actually difficult to have a perfect facility or recycling network. It's indeed a challenge. But does it mean that we will not be able to implement the scheme and it is not perfect? Many members of the public may think that we no longer have the straitjacket when we have shelved the plan. But does it mean that we will have an easy way forward? Our landfills are still going to be exhausted. This is looming on the horizon. So, how can we continue with our waste reduction work? How can we further promote the green collar industries? Ms. Jofi Chan also mentioned some property management companies had increased the amount of management fees. Will the administration appeal to OCs to better regulate the management fees? Thank you.
Well, Secretary, please consider these views further. Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Now the government's collect views from the public, the business sector, and so on, and now it's decided to shelve the introduction of the charging scheme on the 1st of August. Well, that's given some relief to the public because people were really concerned. In the opening remarks of the DCS and the secretary, they say that there is not yet strong enough culture on recycling. So I think it's a matter of expanding the recycling network to further promote the culture of recycling. It's not the case that people don't care about recycling. I don't agree. Now, this is Mayfu Sunshine. Every Wednesday, there is a mobile collection point. People have to wait an hour or half an hour to hand in their recyclables. You can see that their baskets are full. So it's not the case that people don't care about recycling. It's just that there are insufficient recycling facilities in a particular district, so people's interest is dampened in a way. So it's time. So that's why you must now focus on improving the recycling network. You need to have more recycling points, and then you could build the recycling culture. Green dollar. How do we improve the appeal of green dollars so people will recycle more? In Sham Shui Po, there is a care team that's engaging in recycling. They collect, say, small electrical appliances, clothing, and so on from the middle class sector. And then at the grassroots community, they do recycling, and people could exchange their recyclables for such items, and it's very popular. So that's another way to promote recycling. I hope the government will continue with this effort. And then when we try to collect views from restaurants and so on, well, they were given free designated bags. So when we ask them how they recycle food waste, there may be an RCP that's closer by, but they are asked to go to a further away RCP to send their food waste. So it's about disseminating correct information. This is important. And then in the coming year, the government has just briefed us on the plans in taking forward its work. So maybe after a year, you can tell us, perhaps to give us a list of the tasks you're going to embark upon, and then we can see after a year whether they are accomplished or not. Mr. Ronik Chen, thank you. The government wants to reduce waste by implementing the charging scheme. In fact, the public would all like to contribute to environmental protection. Now, since the start of the demonstration scheme on the 1st of January, many said that at this stage they are encountering difficulties. So that's why I support the government's decision. Now, we look at the waste reduction effort in other places. The first step is publicity and education, promoting change in habit, and then an incentives. The next step is an incentive scheme for better recycling. Only the third step is user pays principle, like a waste charging scheme. Now, the government has done much in publicity and education in the past few months. Incentive scheme, I hope the government will do more there, because after giving reward, then the last step is punishing those who would not cooperate, and that means charging. So in the second stage, the government needs to do more in terms of incentives. Now, from the demonstration scheme, a host of issues was identified, and we can see in your paper, you've only given your observations and the findings, but you have not come up with solutions, in particular targeted solutions. So next year, when you come back to give a report, you should tell us what your solutions are in response to the issues identified in the demonstration scheme. I'm sure members would be keen to see that. And then you need to give us a roadmap for the coming year. And under what circumstances would you again consider introducing the charging scheme. So people know you will only consider charging again when all the conditions are ripe. I'm sure people would like to have a roadmap too. So any response, please, Secretary? Any targeted solutions, any roadmap? Actually, you have spoken on that a bit just now, earlier on. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Well, you can see we are now trying to focus on publicity, education, and incentives. And then before we decide how we should enhance the charging scheme, the demonstration scheme has made available various information for us. So we'll see what we need to do. So in the coming months, we'll see how we could enhance the various measures. In particular, the legal liability of frontline workers, the difficulties they enhance, how do we handle bulky waste items, and it's the case that some people are unable to afford the designated bags and the design of designated bags, and can we adopt a progressive approach in the implementation of charging and so on. So we'll look at all these issues in the coming year. Deputy Chairman, Mr. Chen Su-hong. I understand why the government wants to delay the implementation of the charging scheme. The government is trying to be pragmatic. If it forces through the scheme, it's not practical. So therefore, you only you are delaying the scheme, and you only come back to give a report in the middle of the next year. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because I can see the Secretary is determined to take forward the charging scheme. But I'm disappointed. The government says that it remains committed to waste reduction, but it seems that it doesn't have the resolve, and it's incapable of doing something. Now, we've been discussing this issue over and over again in this council after the passage of the bill. We remind the government to try to make sure everything is ready. We've seen 2 deferrals of the scheme. Now there is now keen public interest in the scheme, and of course there will be plenty of opposition. You know that even before you started the demonstration scheme at 14 locations. Now we need a combination of measures to get things right. Recycling, charging, and so on. Now, we're talking about entrenched habit of waste disposal. This is a point raised in the paper, and I fully agree to that. That's why we need to keep up our publicity and education effort. We need to build the recycling network. Recharging is financial means. So I have 2 questions. First, do you think distributing free designated bags works? We find that many people collected the free designated bags in the demonstration scheme, but they didn't use them. So in future, even if you distribute free designated bags, people will use both designated bags and non-designated bags. It's hard to change people's habit if the bags are free. And there are others who collect the free designated bags to save them for the future when charging scheme is in place. So how can you achieve your objective this way? And second question is, why wouldn't you consider a phased approach? Now, for government buildings or government managed premises, we've seen good results in the demonstration scheme. Why wouldn't you consider implementing the charging scheme in these premises first? So why wouldn't you consider a phased charging scheme? Secretary, please be brief with your reply. Thank you, Chairman. The government, is very cautious in introducing the charging scheme on the basis of the findings of the demonstration scheme, and many have pointed out various issues identified. So this case is no longer just about resolve. It's about the legal requirements in the ordinance, and there are difficulties in actual implementation. So we need to sort out those issues first before we could effectively enforce the ordinance. So it's not just a question of resolve. And since we encounter so many actual implementation issues, such as the legal liability of frontline workers, the difficulties faced by workers, the financial burden on certain sectors, and so on. So these are issues that cannot be addressed by a phased approach, but rather we need to consider solutions to these problems. We need to enhance the charging scheme before we decide to take things forward. You asked whether the distribution of free designated bags would be useful. Now, in the past few months, or rather, we shouldn't overlook an important point. There are now many more people who take an interest in the waste reduction. Many are taking part in the effort. They want to use a free designated bag to help try out the charging approach. We give people 20 free designated bags a month, and we want to see if that will lead to waste reduction. So this is an useful education tool. Because then we could allow more people to experience the use of designated bags. Next, Ms. Carmen Can. Thank you. Waste management is an important subject. We've been discussing it for over 2 decades. 3 years ago, there's a law and there's a commencement date, and now we have to delay the implementation of the scheme. Like many other members, I'm disappointed. Maybe after careful consideration, the law will not help us to achieve waste reduction, and then we could dump less and save more. Now the DCS and the SE just gave a verbal report. You say you're coming back in a year to give us a report, but what about a midterm report? Maybe half a year later, you've come up with various solutions, and maybe there's need to adjust these solutions. So could there be a midterm report? That's the first point. Secondly, CAP 603, that's the Producers Responsibility Scheme Ordinance. That's going to be a common legislative framework that's suggested in paper. I think it's something worth pursuing. And then for larger housing estates, there must be waste separation and recycle. And then for recyclables, go to the right recycling bins. Now, this is something you're going to do in the first half of the 1 year period. So maybe this is going to be an effective approach. So what is your stance on that? Third point, retailers are charging $1 for a plastic bag. So can we ask retailers to use the designated bags instead? So it depends on the shopping volume. Instead of going by the current charging scheme for designated bags, instead retailers can charge $1 for designated bags, and so this will help people to get into the habit of using designated bags. Would you consider that? 3 questions. In the coming years, you can see we have much to do. The member asked if we could give you a written report on our work. Yes, we can do that. We will provide a paper later on the list of tasks we have planned. And in the process of carrying out this task, we welcome views from members even after this meeting, so we could keep in communication as to whether there is need for further discussion at the panel. We'll leave it to the panel to decide. Retailers, can they instead give people designated bags for $1 rather than the usual plastic bags? Well, we need to change the design of the designated bags. So we will consider that later. Thank you. Miss Eunice Young. Sorry, speaker's not using the microphone. Now, I'm talking about a common legislative framework for a producer responsibility scheme and recycling for requirement for large housing estates. Would there be a legislative framework. Well, yes, we will look at that in our review. We'll consider the timetable. Definitely, we're going to press ahead with these tasks.
Ms. Eunice Yong. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the future direction of the MSW charging scheme, I'm quite helpless. It's actually a ticking time bomb. We have plastic bag levy, we have waste reduction, we have recycling. We're going to have the second incinerator and a new incinerator in Long Ku Chau. Is actually going to be a long timeline. Public education, separation of waste, waste sorting. Do we have enough collection points? Do we have enough publicity? We are actually on different time points. But then the government said we're going to report to the council next year. The demonstration scheme has been running for 2 months. The findings are not ideal. We fail to see any results with waste reduction at all. For some individual housing estates, we can see a reduction of waste by 10% or 20%, but for other estates, the amount is similar. The time is indeed too short. You should allow a longer space of time before you come back to the council to report to us so that you can better promote to the commercial sector. Then they will be willing to engage in waste reduction together with you. You do need a longer time. If you're just going to come back to make a report next year, this is not responsible. You haven't yet factored in all factors, all tests, and so on. So it will definitely not be good when you're going to come back to the council 1 year later. Say 90% or all of the people will just be against the MSW charging scheme, as said in Tai Kung Pao. You shouldn't rush into the decision that we're going to. You're going back to the council to make a report in a year's time. Well, the secretary can respond to Ms. Eunice Yong's question. She asked about coming back to the council in 1 year's time. Thank you, member, for your question. Regarding the demonstration scheme, we have identified many implementation issues. It's not that we didn't identify these issues. I have already detailed a series of enhancements that we'll have to make. The government does attach a lot of importance to public views. Some 80% of the members of the public did not support the MSW charging scheme, so the government definitely has to listen to the public seriously. We need to consider our strategies on waste management, resource management, and so on. MSW charging scheme is one of the options, is one of our tools in waste management. So as I mentioned, we'll expedite the construction of incinerator. By 2035, we still have the aim of not using any landfills by 2035. We haven't changed in this aim. Next, Mr. Kong. Thank you, Deputy CS and Secretary. Thank you for listening to the public. You didn't force through this scheme. I'd like to highlight the impact of the shelving of the scheme. First, on the bags. On the contract signed with manufacturers, will there be any risks of breaching the contract? Do we need to make any compensation? Just now, the Secretary mentioned distributing designated bags for free. They will serve as publicity initiatives. But after all, they are public funds. Will the administration consider selling these bags to the public? You can sell them at a lower cost. So at least you can recover part of the cost. MSW, municipal waste covers both domestic waste and industrial waste. Domestic waste has been reduced by 10%, whereas industrial waste has increased by 2.4 times. Will the administration consider adopting a two-pronged approach? That is, using different waste reduction measures for domestic waste and industrial waste. Regarding the resolve of the administration, we have been discussing waste reduction for a long time, some 2 decades. Now that we're not going to implement the charging scheme, how can you make the public believe that you still have the resolve to implement MSW charging or waste reduction? Secretary, our contracts with the manufacturers of designated bags do not have any requirements as to the number of bags that have to be produced. As we've said, we will distribute bags in order to promote waste reduction. If there will be a significant change in the number of bags, we will act in accordance with contract provisions. We are not falling short of any target. There is no problem at all. Regarding whether we can sell bags at a cost, we think we should start with publicity. Otherwise, selling bags or selling these designated bags will cause misunderstanding in the community. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions. Separation of waste, waste reduction, these are our aim. MSW charging, this is the tool. The government has the major goal of waste reduction. We need to turn this goal into the individual goals of the public. Apart from punitive measures, we can also provide incentives. But then we shouldn't forget the goal of waste reduction, especially on an individual level. Let's not forget this point. In the report or in the demonstration scheme, you can see that for 3 new buildings or single block buildings, 3 out of the 14 selected premises belong to this category. In the paper, or as the Secretary said, how can we provide more facilities? I won't say they are not helpful, but I fail to see any targeted measures for 3 new buildings. 3 new buildings lack space for these facilities, and I think you need targeted measures, targeted strategies. Next, you are going to come back to report to us in a year's time. It's too long. I don't mean whether you have enough time or not, but then we do need both carrot and stick. The community will have a sigh of relief, but then will they let down their guard? The administration needs to send a message to the community. That is, you will continue to implement the scheme. Don't let the public let down their guard. 3 points, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Land, for your question. Regarding 3 new buildings, we'll set up 100 collection points about food waste. And we will also set up food waste collection points and refuse collection points. And we will also increase the number of green and community facilities to 100 in order to support 3 new buildings. We have identified the problem of a lack of space, and we have covered this point as well. On the carrot and stick approach, we need to, first of all, encourage the public to change the culture, to change your habit before deciding the way forward. Next, Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. 2 points from me. First, I have a suggestion. In the paper, residents do not understand that the government needs to encourage waste reduction through the scheme. This is what I also identified from residents. They consider this plan a tool to increase government revenue. But I'd like to add, apart from making clear the policy intent, we need to let the public know there will still be social costs if we are not going to press ahead with the MSW charging scheme. It is a public disturbance, and this is a difficulty right in front of us. However, if we are not going to do anything, there will be major problems for our future generations. If we need to expand landfills or if we need to construct more incinerators, there will be more costs to society. This will cause disturbance to society. So we need to send this message clearly to the public. When we shelve the plan, there will be a long-standing impact on society. On the review of the demonstration scheme, on the usage rate of designated bags, what can they tell us? Whether they're high or low, what can they tell us? You want to change the habit or behavior of citizens, but there is no economic incentive. Whether citizens use these bags or not, there is no economic incentive. What can they tell us about the behavior of citizens? They don't know whether the scheme would be shelved before the announcement of the government. Then they can still use their day-to-day bags to dispose of domestic waste. After I read the papers, I still don't quite understand what the usage rate of the designated bags can tell us. I do want to know more about it. Secretary, please. On social cost, we'll promote waste reduction through publicity. We'll do more explanation work to the public. Regarding the usage rate of designated bags, whether high or low, what can they tell us? With the management requirements, we can see a high usage rate. However, in implementation, we can identify a lot of challenges. The usage rate of designated bags among the public can tell us whether they agree to the administration on the policy. It actually reveals many issues that we need to deal with in the course of implementation, but not whether citizens like it or not. In the interest of time, a lot of members have already pressed a button, but I can allow a maximum of 3 more members to ask questions. I don't want the next meeting to be aborted. Mr. Robert Lee, Professor Priscilla Lang, and Mr. Ken Lau. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I support the administration's decision to shelve the plan. This has responded to the commercial and industrial sectors. I believe members of the public definitely support environmental protection and waste reduction as source. The MSW charging scheme affects members of the public and many enterprises in Hong Kong. So how can we make sure the scheme will be pragmatic, will be in line with the reality, This is crucial. But at the same time, after delaying the scheme by 1 year, it's good that we have identified many problems with the demonstration scheme. In a year's time, how can we enhance the participation rate, expand the scope of the scheme, how to provide better support to industries, how can we better help members of the public. After all, in a year's time, probably we still can't solve all the problems, for example, the lack of recycling facilities and so on. There will still be backlash from the community. Even with promotion, publicity, we still can't solve all the problems. So in a year's time, how can you make sure we can implement the scheme? Even if we have more time, how can we obtain more support? Regarding greener community, the public can redeem daily necessities. They may not be able to redeem a lot of cash, but I do hope the administration can consider the fact that the public can redeem cash. That is a year later. Secretary, it's difficult to predict what the future holds in a year's time. We need to seize the situation we have right now. The public attaches a lot of importance to environmental protection and waste reduction as source. We need to take advantage of that. Regarding how we can expand the recycling network, how we can step up publicity, then we can gauge how much the situation has improved before we can decide the next step forward. So we work hard on this area. But the main point is that we need to solicit support in the community. So we report to the council in a year's time. Thank you.
议员，
Professor Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say to the EB, don't be let down because it takes time to change behavior. And we need the right condition to do that. I'm glad to see the government is being pragmatic and is delaying the scheme, because now the waste charging scheme is labeled as a revenue raising scheme, and it's hard to change that kind of perception. So we need time to do that. Well, there were 4 terms of government involved, not just one term of government. It was first proposed by Dr. Sarah Liao, and then in 2017, the bill was introduced into this council. I know this term government has no choice but to take on board the task, or to take up the task rather, and it's about changing perception, it's about changing awareness. The community is not ready. In 2000, we set up an association because we needed to, and then because we wanted to promote green awareness. So that's why we suggested green procurement, and now there's green auditing even. So the whole process takes time. Now with the deferral of this waste charging scheme, I hope the community will appreciate we're not just abolishing the scheme altogether, but rather it's about whether we should achieve the objective by charging. Suggested some say incentives will help. Now we have my organization, several shops in Happy Valley. I see people will carry recyclables there, even if they need a long walk. And I'm talking about a green council. We run several recycling stores. So I see people are actually keen to send in their recyclables. They're not doing that for the incentive. But then there are others who won't pay for waste disposal. I don't think we should politicize the whole issue. That's the important point. And don't negate all our effort in promoting environmental protection. But it's about having the right condition and taking a progressive approach. There are many bills that waited for more than a decade. And when it's the right time for us to commence these ordinance, I think we have to do it through education. I'm sure there will be progress eventually. Now, remember those days, there's this litter bug. That in those days we tried to project littering as we projected littering as something bad, and because it was spread disease and so on. And so I hope you have to wait till the committee is ready. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tony Chen. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I think the government is being pragmatic in delaying the implementation of the municipal solid waste charging scheme. It's no point steamrolling through the scheme. It will just lead to more public discontent. I do believe that the government has not been doing enough, far from being enough in in supporting the commencement of the legislation. So we are disappointed. But then we need to look forward. We need to show the public that the government is determined to reduce waste. So maybe there could be regular announcement on waste disposal in Hong Kong, because we all for waste reduction, we will all contribute to that. But now you're not doing enough, or we are all not doing enough. So we need to let people see that. And on the design of the designated bag, definitely it needs to be changed. We want the bag to serve multiple purposes, but right now this bag is only for identification purpose, that is, people have paid for charging, and so it's just a single purpose bag. Is not good enough. The government must learn from the lessons, and so in future together we will all contribute to waste reduction. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your views. Implementation is very important. That's why we put in place a demonstration scheme. We wanted to identify shortcomings in the implementation arrangements, and now we've identified many issues and problems. So we need to enhance the scheme further before we could implement it. And on the government's commitment to waste reduction, well, that remains our commitment, and we will continue to promote waste reductions. So we're going to step up publicity and education. We're also going to substantially expand the recycling network. Hopefully then everyone could do more to reduce waste. You asked if we could regularly publish figures on waste disposal so people can see if there's any progress. Yes, we can do that. We can see publish figures on waste reduction and recycling, so people know if there's any progress. And we'll also consider improving the design of designated bags, and maybe the bags will become multi-purpose. So we will consider all the details. Thank you. Thank you, members. We are running out of time. We should have started the second meeting, otherwise the meeting will be aborted. 26 members had a chance to speak. I and some other members were not able to speak today, but then we all agree that the government is taking on board public views. It's shelving the waste charging scheme, and is going to instead embark on a number of efforts. Now the government is going to table two pieces of subsidy legislation. That is a commencement notice for the revenue ordinance, and also another commencement notice on the charging another charging scheme. The government is going to table these two items. If members have no objection, well, then the government will take forward the two items. And if there's nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. 3 minutes later, we will immediately proceed to the meeting of the panel on environmental affairs.